Everyone, Scott Schmerlson, board member, Board District 3 in the San Fernando Valley. And we're going to do another podcast today, but not just any podcast. This is going to be my favorite podcast that I've ever done, and you'll see why in a few minutes. The podcast is about a gentleman at the district who is, let me say, just beloved by everyone because he's the real deal. He's a very smart man. He's a very well-trained man, but he's also a very humanistic guy. He truly is. And I'm so happy to make this podcast with him. And he is Mark Hovatter, Chief Facilities Executive. He's a guy who, I don't know, he just knows everything about construction and building and trades and everything. He's just such a brilliant guy. He's the kind of guy you can ask a question about, what kind of screw do I need to fix my fan? And he'll tell you exactly what it is. And he'll also tell you how much it's going to cost to build a school. So that's his knowledge from A to Z. And I'm just so happy to do this podcast with him. He's just such a wonderful person. I can't say enough about him. And he's also modest, so I'm sure he's embarrassed, but it's okay. I don't care. He's a great guy. Let me ask Mr. Hovatter a question, and I'm curious about something. When you were in high school, Mr. Hovatter, what were your plans? What were your dreams? What were your hopes? What career did you want to pursue? Can you tell us?
I came from a small high school in rural Missouri, grew up on a farm. We had 118 people in my class, so there weren't a lot of extra classes that were there. My trigonometry class had 6 people in it, but I always knew that I wanted to do something that made a difference. And I was a big dreamer, a small country boy. I lived in LA when I was younger, so I knew there was a city out there somewhere. I did pretty well in studies, not that I was overly brilliant, and thank you for those words, but I worked really hard. And if I didn't understand something, I tried to learn not just what the answer is, but why the answer was. And I had big goals. I ran track, and I thought that someday I should run in the Olympics. Didn't have dreams of winning it, but I would have loved to run it in the Olympics. And I thought I should be president of the United States. So I had big aspirations. We came from a family that didn't have a lot of money. I was free or reduced lunch, there, and didn't have someone else paying. So I knew that if I went to college, it would have to be something I did on my own. I actually got excited because I learned about the academies, the military academies, the Naval Academy. And I wanted to apply for the Naval Academy. And my intent was, I felt an obligation, to serve my country. And that was also an opportunity for me to get an education that someone else paid for and get a lot of experience. And then I could go on and do other things. I was colorblind. I got a congressional nomination to be appointed to the academy, which was a requirement, but I failed my physical because I was colorblind. And the Naval Academy gave out waivers. They gave out 6 waivers for people that were colorblind and still allow you to come into the Navy and go through the Naval Academy. And there were a couple hundred people eligible, and I got shortlisted to the top 10. I had scholarships for other universities, University of Maryland, Old Dominion, a school in Missouri, but I had to decline those because I was pretty confident I was going to pick up that waiver. And then it turns out I didn't pick up that waiver. So I came to California and went to a community college in Citrus College. Main reason I came to California is California at the time started 3 weeks after everyone else did, and everyone else had already started. I went to school for college for a year, and I had to work full time to try to pay my tuition. Went for another semester, and then I decided that I would go through the Navy again, but I did it as an enlisted man. Again, my intent was to go through and help save money so I could pay for my college. Took a lot of classes when I was there, and I was very fortunate I got picked up for a commissioning program when I was in the Navy. So I served 7.5 years enlisted, and then I became a commissioned officer. They paid for my bachelor's degree, let me finish. 5 years later, they paid for my master's degree, and I ended up spending 23 years in the Navy, basically doing construction, the same type of things I do now, except doing it for the military bases. And then when I retired, I'd spent several periods where I lived in California. I went to 4th and 5th grade in California, Los Angeles area, Whittier, Montebello, and I went to 7th and 8th grade when I was in California. And then I came back and went to a year in college, and I always loved California. And every time I had a chance to get a duty station, near LA, I would do it, San Diego or in the Ventura County, even Monterey, and even out in the Imperial Valley. I loved LA. So when I got out, there were some other people from the Navy that had come down to work this great new wonderful construction program, and I really wanted to be part of it. And I've always loved LA. It was a chance for me to get involved with the school systems. I actually thought at one point I was going to be a calculus teacher. In fact, when I retired from the Navy, I was looking at becoming a calculus teacher. The irony is I would have had to go back to school for a couple of years to get my credentials, or I could start working right away and build schools instead of teaching. I still may teach someday before I quit working altogether. I'm going to teach a calculus class at some place. But I just wanted to do something that was a tangible effect, and you can look at it and say, yeah, I was part of that. Couldn't have had a better opportunity than what I had here at the school district.
Mr. Hovatter, I just have a question for you. How does somebody gain so much knowledge about the nuts and bolts of construction like you have? Was it through on-the-job training? Was it through reading? Was it through observation? How do you have this fantastic knowledge about construction? How did that happen?
Well, I had 23 years in the Navy and 20 years here, so 43 years of being in the business helps a whole lot. But I've always wanted to know how, what's behind it. I drove a car, but before I was 16, I'd taken an engine apart and put it back together, with my stepdad, because I wanted to understand why it worked, and not afraid to go do something. I saw a movie once, Indiana Jones, when the pilots had jumped out, and he gets up and starts to fly the plane, and his co-star says, "Do you know how to fly a plane?" He said, "How tough could it be?" So I've kind of had that approach. If other people have figured it out, I can figure it out. So let me get in and do it. And then I listen and try to do it and touch it. Well, anytime I start a job, anyone that works for me, I try to go out and do what they've done for a little while, so at least I understand it. If I'm going to be making a decision that affects the way they do things, I should at least know what it is they do.
Well, I am very, very impressed with your knowledge of home repairs to building a school. I'm telling you, I'm just so impressed. And by the way, I like to know how did you get to LAUSD, and what over the years have you considered your proudest accomplishments? I know there's plenty of proud accomplishments because I have seen what you have done over the years at LAUSD, but how did you get to LAUSD?
Well, I was in Monterey, my last tour of the Navy at the Naval Postgraduate School. So there was a connection to education there, because I was building classrooms just for the postgraduate school for the Navy. And I was convinced I was going to be a calculus teacher. I'd even talked to Cal Lutheran and was going to apply for their program and go through their credentialing. I thought that I would be able to get an emergency credential so I could start teaching right away and then go to classes at night. And then I learned of the construction program LA was doing. And it just so happens 3 of my former bosses in the Navy were already here and already working on that program. So I sent my old boss an email, Jim McConnell, who's the head of the program, and said, hey, I love LA. I would love to be part of that. And he told me to submit a resume, and I got to come in as the deputy director of contracting, which was a great entry point because it got me exposed to every aspect, because everything's got to have a contract to get someone else to come in and do it. Just got to be in it, not on the ground floor, but shortly thereafter. We'd already passed a couple bonds, but we hadn't finished school yet. But I got to help develop the policies that we used to help us grow up in the construction program. Greatest accomplishments, there've been a lot of good things. I've been so fortunate to be part of a team that literally changed the face of LA. Our greatest accomplishment, if you look in terms of volume and money and impact on the most people, was we had kids that couldn't go to a local school. They were going year round, and they would have to get on a bus to go someplace where there was an empty seat because there wasn't one in their neighborhood. We had to go year round. And then, my least favorite part of what we did before I got here was we put a bunch of bungalows on the playgrounds and parking lots and called them classroom. We promised we would give everyone the opportunity to go to a school in their neighborhood. And to do that, we had to build 131 brand new schools, in an area where people said, it's hard to build schools, you can't do it. And it was hard. Building's easy. Getting space to build was the hard part. You had to tear something down, but we were able to do that and accomplish that. And I was really proud of that. And just the impact we had on the neighborhoods. We didn't go to the nicest, easiest flat construction land. We went to, what used to be a dumping ground somewhere. We went to what used to be an undesirable part of the neighborhood where people are afraid to go out after dark. And then we built a school, and suddenly the neighborhood started to change. Businesses came in that wouldn't come before. People started, putting new paint jobs on the apartment complexes. And now in areas where people used to be afraid to walk after dark, or there was such a health risk, there are people out pushing strollers at night and walking their dogs. And we got to change the face of a complete neighborhood. So it impacted not just the students, but everyone else that was around it. And, how can you not be happy? And very proud to have had the opportunity to be part of that.
It's so true. Change the face of a neighborhood by building new schools and refreshing that neighborhood. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. I have a question I was thinking as you were talking. Did you ever want to become an architect?
I did. I mentioned when I was in the Navy, they let me go back to school as part of a commissioning program. And I actually started as an architect engineering program. So you were an architect and an engineer. Problem was I only had 2.5 years. The Navy would let me go for 2.5 years to get my degree. And it was going to take me about 3 or 4 years to do that. So I ended up doing the next best thing and went into the civil engineering program.
Now, I know that you have lots of things that you want to do after you retire, but I am positive now. I am absolutely positive that you're going to be a calculus teacher. I just know it. You had said it so many times and you're so determined. I bet you will be a calculus teacher, and that would be wonderful because you have a way with people, a way with kids, and easygoing manner. And it's important for a teacher to be able to connect with kids, and that's you. That is you.
One of my favorite movies of all time, well, two of my favorite movies. One was To Sir with Love. He was an engineer who started teaching kids, always inspired by that. And, you get to meet a lot of famous people in LA. And I actually sat in a restaurant once and he sat at a table behind me. I didn't go bother him and tell him, he was my inspiration, but I just kind of nodded and nodded back. That was a pretty exciting time. The other exciting time was one of my second favorite movies was, I think it's called Stand and Deliver, the Jaime Escalante story.
Yes.
The teacher who taught calculus, and it turns out it was not only at a school in LAUSD, but I got to be part of building an auditorium that we named after the man. So that was really a great moment for me, that one of my heroes, we got to pay a tribute to him at the school where he actually taught calculus. That was the basis of that movie.
I can honestly say, Mr. Hovatter, you are a hero also. You're a hero to the kids of LAUSD, the parents and the teachers, all the wonderful things you've done at LAUSD, building new schools, making life easier for people. And I think you're our hero. You are our hero, Mr. Hovatter, and it's the truth. And I don't say that very often, but that is the truth. You are, well, I do tell the truth very often, but you are our hero. Thank you so much. This is a great interview. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I am here. It's just my computer is misbehaving, but I am here. Jeannie was calling me like, where are you here? Yes, I'm going to pause.